Well, another sort of interesting aspect to my childhood was the fact that my mother was a psychiatric social worker, and we lived. Well, I was born in Cambridge, and we lived in Cambridge because the place where she started her psychiatric social work was the London School of Economics, and that moved from London to Cambridge during the war, and I was born in 1943. And having got her qualification, she worked at Fulham Mental Hospital, which was a place that I visited quite often, and there were two things that struck me. One was the strange behaviour of the people that were there, and the patients, and my mother used to try and explain, that they weren't well, and quite often she used to bring some home, and they would help us plant potatoes and things like that, and stay the night, and have extraordinary tales to tell at breakfast time about whom they'd met in the night and so forth, Queen and such like, total fantasies, of course. And then it occurred to me that there was some link, I suppose, in later years. I realised that there was a link with what I'd experienced as a child, and these people and the problems that seem to be increasing around the world, particularly in relation to depression and mental health. Yes, I mean, in later life I became more interested in mental health, and in those, at that time I began to make the contact with the sort of contact between what I had experienced as a child and also my interest in mental health. But one of the most striking things that I experienced as a young boy was when my mother took me to Fulham Mental Hospital in the late 40s. There was a big sort of lion's cage in the garden where the patients were allowed to be. They were enclosed, the seriously ill patients. And then, of course, in the early 50s, the drugs arrived, and that completely disappeared in a matter, I don't know, 2-3 years. That had gone, and there was a new director called David Clark, who had a much more open approach to treatment. And that, I suppose, was one of the most striking things that I observed, that extraordinary relationship between the introduction of successful drugs and the change in the life of the patients.